Hello, welcome to this video. In the previous video, we briefly spoke about object-oriented programming. Object-oriented programming is a popular paradigm to structure our complex code. We need to organize our code as it gets more complex. In the last video, I might have mentioned that it all starts by bundling up data in an object. Let us create an object. I am declaring a variable with the name user1 and I am assigning it an object with a key name and a value of John Doe, and with the key of items and the value of 0, and with the key increment with the value of function which returns the pre-incremented value of the items of the object user1. So user1 dot items. Now this function can be written in a short way by removing function and the increment word, okay, and assigning and adding the parentheses. Okay, now let us console log the user1 by calling increment function and see if our items goes from 0 to 1. When I console log it, let me bring this a little bit, and when I console log it, we get the output to be 1. Okay, cool. Now we have our data bundled in the object user1 and the functionality is associated with this data. We have our functionality here increment and it's bundled inside of the object user1 and we have the data inside of the user1. Now when a user clicks or adds an item to the cart, we have the functionality within this data. When a user clicks on add to cart, user.increment function gets triggered. This data is only responsible for increasing the items in the shopping cart, and this is bundled up in an object, and we are encapsulating the associated functionality with the appropriate data. We are encapsulating the associate functionality with the appropriate data, and we have the data inside of this object. Items is inside of this object, and user1 is this object. This is known as encapsulation. We might have a feature to delete items from the cart. All you need to do is you add an decrement function and trigger it when user clicks on delete button. That is user.decrement function gets triggered by calling it. Encapsulation is defined as wrapping up of data in a single unit. Okay, now with the encapsulation aside, let us talk a bit on how you can create an object. This here is one way of creating an object. This is known as JavaScript object literal. A JavaScript object literal is a comma-separated list of name value pairs wrapped in curly braces. This is the name and this is the value. We are wrapping it in a curly brace and we are separating it with a comma. Name, value, comma, and we are wrapping it inside of curly brace. Object literals encapsulate data enclosing it in a tidy package. Another way is by dot notation. Dot notation. Here I am declaring a variable with the name user2 and I am assigning it a empty curly brace. And to add key value pairs or to assign properties inside of this empty brace and empty curly braces, we use the dot notation. Here user2 is the object, that is the empty curly brace, and I'm sorry, and I'm assigning it the key name, and here on the RHS we have the value. Here let me name it as Jane Doe, and let us add the items. Here items is the key and 2 is the value. User2 dot increment is the function increment, and we are returning the pre-incremented value of user2 dot items. Okay, now let us console log user2 and call the increment function. Console log user2 dot increment. Okay, when I run this program, we get the output as 3. I'm sorry, 2 became 3. Okay, now this syntax works. There's another syntax, and that is the object dot create syntax. Let me comment the first two for a while. Okay, now I am declaring a variable I'm naming it user3 and I'm using the object.create syntax, object.create, and I am passing it an empty curly brace as a parameter. Now let us console log user3 and see what we get the output as. I'm clearing. I'm bringing this a little bit on the top. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm passing it an empty curly brace. Now let me run the program again. We get the output to be empty curly brace. And inside, by expanding the empty curly brace, we can see that we have a dunder proto hidden property, which is an object. And when I expand it again, we can see there's again a different dunder proto, which is an object, that is an hidden property. And we have the properties inside of it. This dunder proto inside, and we have another dunder proto. This is known as the prototypal chain. We'll talk about a double underscore proto double underscore, that is dunder proto, and the prototype chain, which on expanding we see that the object has a different object inside of it, and this object can have different object inside of it, and this is known as the prototypal chain. We'll get on prototypal chain and dunder proto in great detail in the upcoming videos. Now this need not be an empty brace. We can pass null as a parameter too. Let's see what the output is when we pass null. Let me run the program again. We can see that we get an empty curly brace. No matter what you pass inside the create a function as a parameter, you're going to get empty brace as the output. But when I expand it, we can see that we have no properties when I pass null inside of it. It's not limited to null. We can pass a different object inside of it. I'm passing user1. Let me uncomment this. Okay. I'm passing user1 object inside of the curly brace. I'm passing user1 as the parameter instead of the object.create method. Now when I run it, I get an empty curly brace as expected. But instead of the dunder proto, that is the hidden property, one second, let me put my phone on silent. I'm sorry. Okay. Now, inside of the dunder proto, we have the property, we have the object, which is user1. We have increment function, we have items to be 0, and we have the name to be John Doe. Okay, cool. Now, to assign properties inside of user3, we use the dot notation syntax. User3 dot the key name, which is name, and I'm assigning it Alex Doe this time, and user3 dot items to have 3 items, and user3 dot increment to be function increment, and I'm pre-incrementing the items number again. So I'm returning plus user3 dot items. Now let me console log user3 and then let me call the function increment. Okay, I'm clearing this console and running it. We get the output to be 4. Okay, so we are done with this video. In the next video, we shall create a function where we house all the objects. In this, we are creating different objects for different users. Suppose if we have millions of users, we can't assign an object to each and we can't keep creating a different object for every user. So we'll house all the functionality inside of a function. So thanks for watching this video. See you in the next video.